On the rundown for today's Philadelphia Eagles now, the Carolina Panthers have requested to interview Eagles offensive coordinator Brian Johnson. Yes, you heard that right. Also, I'm going to explain why the Philadelphia Eagles should give Mike Vrabel a bag, not to be their head coach, but if Nick Sirianni stays to become the Eagles' next defensive coordinator, because this Eagles defense is an unmitigated disaster. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Anytime there's a breaking news story, anytime there's a big rumor out there, if you want really informative Eagles analysis, we do it all right here on Eagles Now, and we're 386 people away from 70,000 subscribers. So hit that sub button, and if you're already subscribed, I want you to type real one down in the comment section right now. Let's begin with Brian Johnson. He is looked at in such a negative way from this Eagles fan base, and early in the year, I was defending him a little bit. You had to give him a little bit of leeway to see how he was going to be able to progress as the Eagles offensive coordinator, but as we've progressed throughout the 2023 season, flipping the page to the 2024 calendar year, Brian Johnson has regressed. This Eagles offense has gotten worse, and right now, they just don't have any answers. And according to Adam Schefter, despite the Eagles' offensive struggles, the Carolina Panthers have requested an interview with the Eagles' offensive coordinator. But there's a couple of details here that we do need to relay to the audience. First, though, Brian Johnson, in meeting with the media today at the NovaCare Complex, was asked about this interview request, and he said, "I have no comment. All my focus is on this playoff game and putting players in position to make plays. This is what it's all about. We play these 17 games for this opportunity. Everybody understands this is all that matters. This is it. And this is the end of the road. Everybody has to put their best foot forward or it's over." And I think everyone understands that. As for those details, this per the NFL rules, Brian Johnson would not be able to interview until next week. And the earliest date that he'd be able to interview with Carolina would be January 17th. Their process of trying to find a head coach to replace Frank Reich, very rigorous. And the list of names, very, very long. But for any of you who are concerned about Brian Johnson being able to prepare for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as well as interviewing for one of the Buccaneers' rivals in the Carolina Panthers, you don't have to worry about that because he cannot interview for this gig until next week. Johnson's path as a coach, it's been a long, windy road, and prior to him being offensive coordinator, he was looked at as a great up-and-coming offensive mind. I thought it was pretty interesting how Adam Schefter this morning was on 97.5 The Fanatic and said, "I still think at one point he can be a head coach down the road, but maybe just not yet." And to me, he just doesn't look primed and ready to be a head coach yet. I'm not saying that he's not a good coach or can't be, but there are flaws in his game, so to speak. But had a great career playing quarterback at Utah. Professional career doesn't last long, so he goes to his alma mater, and in 2010-2011, he's the quarterbacks coach with the Utes. Then he gets elevated to a hybrid role, quarterbacks coach as well as offensive coordinator, and at that time, the youngest play caller in all of college football. He gets another upgrade and job title and goes to a better program in Mississippi State, and that's where he worked alongside Dak Prescott, as we've talked about here on the show. Then he goes to Houston. He's the quarterbacks coach there in 2017, links up with Dan Mullen, and he's the quarterbacks coach for Florida in 2018-2019, then gets elevated to offensive coordinator. And then Nick Sirianni, when he came to Philadelphia, he plucked Brian Johnson from the Florida Gators to become the Eagles quarterbacks coach, and he did a great job in helping to develop Jalen Hurts, as evidenced by Hurts' growth and development at that quarterback position. And then Shane Steichen left for the Indianapolis Colts. He's done wonders with what is a bottom five roster that nearly made the playoffs, with Gardner Minshew as their starting quarterback for much of the year after so many injuries on that roster and Anthony Richardson going down early in the year. The Indianapolis Colts were fighting for a playoff spot in Week 18, and Brian Johnson was always the logical replacement for Shane Steichen. And there was so much buzz behind him being the guy. He ends up getting inevitably hired, but this year has not been an easy one for him, as well as Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense. Next up, I want you to get loud in the comment section. A lot of you don't like Brian Johnson, so if you want him gone, I want you to type airport down below in the comment section, meaning you'll drive him to the airport to go to the Carolina Panthers. The Eagles this year clearly missing Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon. I had a feeling we were going to say that about Steichen. I didn't know that we were going to be saying that about Jonathan Gannon, but the Eagles miss Jonathan Gannon. This defense has been historically bad, 30th in points per game, 26th in yards per game, 24th in yards per play. They're second to last on third down conversion rate, and they're 30th in the red zone. Those are money areas, and the Eagles have been anything but money on third down conversions as well as stopping teams in the red zone. And then offensively, what's really weird about this is, yes, the Eagles' talent has been able to win out. They've been awful in 5 of the last 6 weeks, but even though they've been so bad and failing to play good offensive football, the numbers and the raw numbers really aren't bad for this Eagles offensive unit. 7th in points per game, 8th in yards per game, 12th in yards per play, 3rd in third down conversion rate, and 9th in the red zone. But when you watch this team, the eye test tells you there's just a huge dip between a Shane Steichen called offense and a Brian Johnson called offense. And here are my issues with Johnson, and this is why I don't think that he's ready to become a head coach in this league. The offense for the last month and a half has looked ill-prepared, and a lot of that is coming against some really good teams. And as a head coach, you can't afford to let that happen for an extended period of time, let alone as an offensive coordinator. And the Eagles have also had a lack of plan at the line of scrimmage and a lack of execution. No answers against the blitz, no hot routes, no safety valves, no checkdowns. Wide receivers are running downfield. As Hurts is getting blitzed, they're not looking back at the football to receive it from Jalen Hurts. And part of this is on Hurts for not recognizing the blitz at the line of scrimmage. But as a play caller, and again, this is on Brian Johnson, as I've said, as well as Nick Sirianni, because this is his system, you have to have answers against the blitz. And right now, teams are just sending the house at Hurts, and the Eagles have no answers for that. And that lies partially on the plate and in the hands of Brian Johnson. I think the play calling this year has also been inconsistent. Last year, this was an Eagles team that was explosive in the pass game downfield, but they were brute with physical force in running the football, and they've gone away from that type of identity with the really good offensive line. And then lastly, my issue with Brian Johnson, not great situationally, especially at the end of games. And this doesn't mean that Brian Johnson at one point cannot be a head coach. For him, a lot of teams were interested in him being their OC. Once Steichen left, he decided to do the smart thing and stuck with the organization that he had been with over the last couple of years. Familiarity is a real thing. You know, he played under Jalen Hurts' pops when Brian Johnson was in high school. I just don't think that right now he's ready, and this year has certainly proven that. And the eye test is telling. This Eagles offense has looked bad from a schematic standpoint, to not having answers, to failing to fulfill expectations, not utilizing playmakers in the correct manner, late communication, lack of pre-snap motion, not adjusting, not making audibles on the fly, not getting play calls in on time. All of these things have been big issues for this Eagles offense this year. Coming up next, Mike Vrabel. I want you to name your price to be the Eagles defensive coordinator. Stay tuned for that because Mike Vrabel is a hell of a coach, and I thought the Titans did him dirty. But first, today's Eagles Now is sponsored by Game Time. I'm back in the Chat Sports studios after being in Houston, Texas from Friday through Tuesday, covering the national championship between Michigan and Washington. And we didn't get tickets to that game until late in the process because we were doing so much content, and we were able to get tickets last minute. Best seats at the lowest price guaranteed as the prices dropped as the event got closer thanks to Game Time. And if you use the code EaglesChat, you get $20 off your purchase. I know there are no more Eagles games left unless somehow we would get an Eagles-Rams or Eagles-Packers NFC Championship game, which is highly unlikely. But if you want to go to a college football game, if you want to go to Eagles-Bucks on the road in Tampa to take that stadium over, looking as though there could be rain in the forecast, 96% chance of precipitation right now. You want to go to a Sixers game, you can do that with the Game Time app. Concerts, comedy shows, theater events as well. Link is available down in the comment section. And once again, you redeem the code EaglesChat to get $20 off. We'll put that link down below in the comment section as well as in the description of this video. Look, it is time for the Philadelphia Eagles to be aggressive. And I think that the Philadelphia Eagles should pay Mike Vrabel whatever the hell he wants to be their next defensive coordinator. The average salary for a coordinator in this league, $1 million. But if I'm Philadelphia, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, they're really aggressive. As the owner and general manager of this team, you need to improve the defensive side of the football. You can do that with Vrabel. If he doesn't land a head coaching job elsewhere, I would honestly give him $5-6 million per year to be the Eagles' next defensive coordinator, and I'd give him a blank check. And first, I'd see what he wants, and then I might come down on that price a little bit. But the point here being, I want Vrabel to be the Eagles' next defensive coordinator. In 6 years with the Tennessee Titans, he maximized that Titans roster with bad quarterback play. Players love to play for him. I thought that his Titans teams always played above their weight, meaning they always surpassed expectations, and he maximized that roster. He won a lot, 54-45 for a winning percentage of nearly 55%. That's the 12th best mark in the NFL. He has a great defensive scheme, learned under Bill Belichick as a player. Players love him, and his teams were always tough. And right now, I see an Eagles team that schematically is a mess. They're dropping Hassan Reddick back into coverage. They can't get after the quarterback with the highly paid defensive line because Howie Roseman doesn't invest in linebackers. They're bad there. They suffered a bunch of injuries in the secondary, and the communication issues are awful. And I think that Vrabel would be able to at least absorb some of the negatives that come with coaching this Eagles team. And if the Eagles make a couple of upgrades in the offseason, I'm signing C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I'm giving a bag to Patrick Queen. Mike Vrabel would be a great defensive coordinator hire. And think about this. He made 3 playoff trips in 6 years. It included having the number 1 seed with Ryan Tannehill as the starting quarterback. And he was able to have a lot of postseason success and a lot of regular season success with these quarterbacks leading the way for the Titans. Marcus Mariota, Ryan Tannehill, Blaine Gabbert, Malik Willis, Josh Dobbs, Will Levis. And you look at these Eagles defensive numbers, ladies and gentlemen, they are awful. They are historically bad. And over the last month and a half, really since that Week 13 game against San Francisco, this Eagles team cannot stop a nosebleed. All year, 30th in points per game, 26th in yards per game, 24th in yards per play, 31st in third down conversion rate, red zone percentage at number 30. And the thought here, just let Mike Vrabel be the head coach of this defense if he can't land a head coaching job elsewhere. I think him going to the New England Patriots to take over for Bill Belichick makes a lot of sense. He will land head coaching interviews. But are a lot of teams in this head coaching cycle going to try to interview an offensive mind as compared to a defensive mind? You look at the teams in the playoffs right now, a lot of them offensive-led organizations with offensive play callers at head coach or offensive minds as head coaches. So Mike Vrabel might not be able to get a head coaching job. And if he doesn't, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, pay him the money. In 2022, the average salary for a coordinator, as I said, $1 million. So if Vrabel wants to wait another year or if he doesn't land a gig for a head coaching job, come to Philadelphia, my man. You got a fan base that'll love you. You have a defensive style that the city will absolutely love. Your defensive style fits some of the personnel on this defensive unit. Mike Vrabel was making $9.5 million per year as a head coach. That's top 10, or at least was, among all head coaches at the NFL level. You give him $5-6 million to be a coordinator, it's a pretty damn good job. So with that, I ask you this to round out the show. Get in the shoes of Lurie. Get in the shoes of Howie. How much would you pay Mike Vrabel per year? Let me know down in the comments section. We'll be going live tomorrow on Thursday on Eagles Now to preview this game against the Buccaneers. So stay tuned for that and make sure you subscribe.